After 5 years of marriage, I was still childless. Then one day, my mother-in-law angrily shoved me and shouted, "You're not a real woman. You can't even have children." Her words cut deep, as she went on to call me names and demanded that I leave the room and sleep outside on the balcony. I was stunned by her outburst, but what hurt even more was my husband's reaction. He didn't defend me. He stood silently by his mother's side, almost as if he agreed with her. I left the room feeling broken, but I promised myself I'd do something about it. My name is Talia, and I want to share my story with you. It's a journey through love, family conflict, and ultimately, my fight for independence. 5 years ago, I believed I had my life mapped out. At 30, I was a successful marketing executive who loved her work. I married Merrick, a 34-year-old with dreams that matched mine, and together, we were planning our future. We both wanted kids, but we also agreed to wait a few years to enjoy our life as a couple. At the time, it felt like a simple, practical choice. I never imagined that decision would lead to years of stress, pressure, and heartbreak. Merrick and I met at a corporate event. He was charming, ambitious, and we quickly fell in love. Our wedding felt like the start of a fairy tale, and for a while it was. We were happy and excited to build our life together, and we enjoyed the freedom of our early years without children. But everything changed when Merrick's father, Grayson, suffered a stroke. His family insisted we move into their home in Chicago to help with his care. I didn't want to go. I loved our cozy apartment, filled with laughter and memories, but family obligations won, and we moved in with his parents. What I thought would be a temporary arrangement stretched out for months. Living with Merrick's family was a huge adjustment. The house was always busy, with constant tension and unspoken expectations. His mother, Marigold, was particularly challenging. She was a traditional homemaker who believed that a woman's primary role was to be a wife and mother. From the moment I stepped into their home, I felt the weight of her expectations pressing down on me. Marigold believed that my worth as a woman was tied to having children, and since I hadn't given her a grandchild, I became her target. In the beginning, her criticisms were subtle. She would say things like, "You should really learn to cook better," or "Merrick works so hard, a wife should support him more." These comments stung, but I tried to brush them off. I focused on my career, putting in long hours, and proving that I could contribute financially. I hoped that my dedication and hard work would help Marigold see my value beyond her traditional views. But as months turned into years, her comments grew more hurtful. I'll never forget one night after a long day at work. I came home exhausted, only to find Marigold waiting for me. She looked at me with disdain and said, "Talia, a real woman knows how to take care of her family. I just don't see how you fit into that picture." Her words felt like a slap in the face. Despite all my achievements, she made me feel as though I was failing, as if I wasn't enough. Merrick tried to stand up for me at first. He would tell his mom, "Talia works hard, and we're trying to have a baby. It just takes time." But as the months passed, I sensed that he was starting to give in to his mother's expectations, and I felt more alone than ever. The breaking point came when Merrick's sister, Juniper, returned home unexpectedly. She was pregnant and recently divorced, and her arrival threw the household into chaos. Marigold was thrilled. She finally had a grandchild on the way. But then, Marigold made a shocking decision. She decided that Juniper would need my room. "Talia, you'll have to move to the balcony," Marigold ordered, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I was speechless. I didn't see it coming when my mother-in-law pushed me and yelled, "You're not a real woman. You're useless. You can't even have children." Her words tore through me. I stood there in shock, my heart breaking. I looked at Merrick, hoping he would stand up for me. He did protest, but his voice was weak, hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if he wanted to stand against his mother. In that moment, I realized just how isolated I was. That I stood there, feeling like I could barely breathe. Marigold's words echoed in my mind, cutting deeper than I ever thought possible. "You're not a real woman if you can't make sacrifices for family," she snapped, throwing names at me that felt like sharp stones. I turned to Merrick, desperate for some support. Merrick, please, I begged, hoping he'd finally stand up for me, defend me. But he just stood there, silent and torn between his mother and me. In that instant, anger surged through me. How could he let her speak to me like this? Right then, I decided I'd had enough. That night, I moved out to the balcony as Marigold had demanded, but I also knew it was time to act. I realized I couldn't keep pouring my energy and finances into a family that barely valued me. So, I took a bold step. I stopped contributing financially. I quit paying for groceries, bills, and anything else around the house. This decision was both empowering and frightening. I knew my income mattered to them, and without it, they'd struggle. As the days passed, the tension in the house grew unbearable. Marigold and Merrick were furious. I could hear their arguments in the evenings, their voices growing louder as the financial strain became more apparent. They blamed each other, their voices full of frustration, and for once, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I was finally reclaiming some control over my life. About a month later, both Merrick and Marigold came to me with apologies. They admitted that they had underestimated my role in the household, not only financially, but also in maintaining a sense of peace. Yet, as I listened, their apologies felt empty, like they were just trying to pull me back into their lives to make things easier for themselves. By then, my heart had hardened. I had made up my mind. I was done. The dream of a life filled with love and mutual respect was slipping away, and I wasn't willing to keep sacrificing myself for something so one-sided. I started planning my next steps carefully. I filed for divorce, packed my things, and set my sights on New York City. It was a huge leap, and the thought of starting over was both exciting and terrifying. But deep down, I knew it was time to find myself again. Moving to New York felt like a breath of fresh air. My new apartment was small, but it had a cozy charm, nestled in a vibrant neighborhood. The energy of the city was exhilarating, people bustling by, cars honking, life buzzing all around me. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, oppressive atmosphere of Merrick's family home, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I quickly threw myself into my new job at a marketing firm. It felt amazing to be back in an environment where my talents were appreciated. Surrounded by ambitious colleagues, I took on challenging projects that reignited my passion for work. Every accomplishment felt like a victory, proof that I was strong and capable on my own. Still, even as I embraced my newfound freedom, the memories of my old life haunted me. I missed the idea of family, the love I once believed I shared with Merrick. I'd lie awake some nights, wondering if I'd made the right choice. The emotional wounds left by Marigold's harsh words and Merrick's silence lingered, a constant reminder of everything I'd endured. One evening, while I was working late on a campaign, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Merrick. "Can we talk? I miss you." My heart sank. I hadn't heard from him since I'd left, and a swirl of anger and nostalgia rushed over me. Part of me wanted to reply, to hear what he had to say, but another part of me felt wary, reminding me to keep looking forward. After a lot of back and forth, I agreed to meet him at a small coffee shop near my place. When I walked in, I saw him sitting in a corner, looking anxious yet relieved. He brightened up when he spotted me, but kept his gaze low, almost as if he was ashamed. "Talia," he said, standing as I approached. "I'm really glad you came." His voice was soft, unsure. "Hi, Merrick," I replied, forcing a polite smile. We sat down, and for a moment, there was only silence, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us. "I've missed you," he said at last, staring at the table. "Things have been really hard at home. Mom keeps asking about you." I felt a pang in my chest, but I pushed it down, focusing on the question I needed him to answer. "And what about you, Merrick? How are you handling all this?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. He looked up, struggling to find the words. "Honestly, it's been tough. Mom, she's struggling without you there. She keeps trying to get me to convince you to come back. She thinks, well, she still blames you." His voice faltered. Hearing him say that hit me harder than I expected. It was a painful reminder that despite everything, Marigold still saw me as the problem, and Merrick, even now, seemed unable to fully break free from her influence. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that surprised even me. Asterisk me? Asterisk, I'm the problem, Merrick? You saw how she treated me. I didn't leave for no reason. Merrick looked down, his voice defensive. I know, Talia, but it's complicated. She's my mom. I can't just ignore her. As we talked, it became clear that Merrick hadn't changed. He was still tangled up in his family's expectations, unable to break free. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could find a way to rebuild. But as I looked at him, I knew I had to choose myself this time. Merrick, I said softly, meeting his eyes, I've been rebuilding my life here. I'm happy. I don't want to go back to that toxic environment. His face fell, and I could see the pain in his eyes. I don't want to lose you, Talia, he said, his voice filled with regret. I wish things could be different. It's not just about us anymore, I replied, feeling tears well up. I need to find my own path. I can't keep sacrificing my happiness just to win your family's approval. After our meeting, I walked through the bustling city streets, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. I had finally stood up for my independence, but the ache of leaving Merrick behind lingered. New York felt alive, pulsing with energy, and I reminded myself that I was now in control of my own destiny. As days turned into weeks, I threw myself fully into my work. I made new friends who inspired me, who encouraged me to push my limits. I even signed up for classes to expand my skills, testing myself in ways I'd never thought possible. But the weight of Merrick's family wasn't completely gone. Marigold still called occasionally, each time trying to guilt me back into the fold. You are part of this family, Talia, she would say, her voice sharp and accusing. You can't just abandon us. Each call left me feeling drained, but I stayed strong. I'm not abandoning anyone, Marigold. I'm just choosing to live for myself now. I was determined to protect the peace I had found. One day, I received an unexpected, frantic call from Juniper. Talia, I really need to talk to you. It's about Mom, she said, her voice shaky. I could hear the desperation in her tone, so we met at a cafe near my apartment. When she walked in, she looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy. Mom hasn't stopped pressuring me since you left, she confessed. She keeps saying I'm the reason you left, that it's my fault, and that I need to convince you to come back. My heart broke for her. Juniper, I said, reaching across the table to hold her hand, you can't take that on. It's not your responsibility. You have your own life, your own child to think about. You don't need to carry this family's burden. Tears filled her eyes. But she won't stop, Talia. I feel like I'm constantly failing her, and now I'm scared I'll fail my own child too. You're not failing anyone, I assured her, squeezing her hand gently. You have to put yourself and your baby first. Set boundaries with her, Juniper. Don't let her guilt you into giving up your happiness. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I knew it wouldn't be easy for her to stand up to Marigold, but I hoped my words would give her the courage to protect herself. A few days later, I received a message from Merrick, asking if we could meet. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to reopen old wounds. But after some thought, I agreed. We met at a quiet park, and when I saw him, I could tell he was carrying a heavy weight. Talia, he began, his voice soft, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I realize how much I let my family come between us. I should have stood up for you, but I didn't. And I'm so sorry. His apologies stirred something inside me, but I knew it wasn't enough. Merrick, I said, my voice calm but firm, I appreciate your words, but it's too late. I've filed for divorce. I need to move forward, and that means leaving all of this behind. He looked devastated, nodding slowly as the reality sank in. I understand, he whispered, his voice breaking. I wish I had done things differently. I wish things had been different too, I replied, feeling a deep sadness. But we can't change the past. I have to do what's right for me now. As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had made my choice, and for the first time it felt like the right one. It was time to let go and focus on building a life that I deserved. In the weeks that followed, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident, and finally at peace. I embraced each day, fully present in the life I was building for myself. Knowing I had the power to create my own happiness, I poured my energy into my work and even picked up painting again. Each brushstroke felt like a small piece of my identity returning, a way to release emotions I'd buried deep for so long. Then one evening, Juniper called. But this time, her voice was different, stronger, more certain. "Talia," she said, "I finally told Mom I need some space. It wasn't easy, but I did it. I'm trying to set those boundaries you talked about." A surge of pride washed over me. "That's incredible, Juniper. I'm so proud of you. It's not easy, but it's a big step in the right direction." As we ended the call, I felt a sense of hope, realizing that my journey wasn't just about finding my own freedom, it was about helping Juniper find hers too. There would still be challenges, but I was ready to face them. I was learning to let go of the past and fully embrace the future I had always wanted. After filing for divorce, I went through a whirlwind of emotions: relief, sadness, and a lingering fear. It was a tough choice, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. I needed to break free from the toxic environment and finally live for myself. I had spent too much time trying to fit into a life that wasn't truly mine. Now it was time to move forward, to leave it all behind. The divorce process was exhausting. Merrick tried to change my mind, promising he'd stand up to his mother and that we could start fresh. But I knew that going back would only trap me again in the same cycle. "Merrick," I told him firmly, "I'm done. This isn't just about your mother. It's about me needing a life where I'm not constantly judged or undervalued." He looked heartbroken, but he could see that I meant it. When the papers were signed, it felt as if a weight had lifted from my shoulders. I was finally free from a marriage that had drained me emotionally. This was more than just ending things with Merrick, it was about reclaiming my own identity and voice. Predictably, Marigold didn't take the news well. She called me in a fury, accusing me of tearing their family apart. "How could you do this to us?" to Merrick. "You're selfish," she yelled, her voice full of bitterness. But this time, her words didn't have the same power over me. I answered calmly, "Marigold, I'm not responsible for your happiness or your family's. I need to take care of myself now." And with that, I hung up, knowing it was the last time I'd let her manipulate me. I realized I needed to distance myself completely, even from Juniper, as much as I cared for her. So I sent her a heartfelt message, explaining that I needed space to heal and move on. It hurt to say goodbye, but I knew it was necessary to truly rebuild my life. In the months that followed, I focused on creating a new life for myself. I poured myself into my career, tackling challenging projects that reignited my passion for marketing. I moved into a beautiful new apartment overlooking Central Park, a space that felt truly mine. I explored the city, joined art classes, and made friends who valued and respected me for who I was. It wasn't always easy. There were lonely days, moments when I questioned whether I'd made the right choices. But those doubts were fleeting, and I reminded myself of the strength it took to walk away from a life that was suffocating me. One day, as I strolled through Central Park, I realized just how far I had come. I had let go of the pain and resentment that had weighed me down for so long. I was no longer the woman who felt trapped and powerless. I was independent, confident, and finally at peace. Looking back, I see that my journey wasn't just about leaving a toxic marriage or a controlling family. It was about finding myself again, my voice, my strength, my worth. I had to let go of everything holding me back to embrace the future I truly deserved. Now, I wake up each day excited about what lies ahead. I've started mentoring young women in my industry, sharing my story, and helping them navigate their own paths. It's deeply fulfilling, knowing I can inspire others to stand up for themselves and never settle for less than they deserve. I've learned that true independence isn't about being alone. It's about living authentically, making choices that align with who you are, and refusing to let anyone diminish your light. I'm proud of the woman I've become, and I'm excited for the future I'm building, a future that's truly my own. I may not know exactly what's next, but one thing is certain. I will never again compromise my happiness for anyone. I found my freedom, and I'm never letting it go.